Emily had always loved the quiet streets of her suburban neighborhood in Oregon. Tree-lined sidewalks, morning greetings from neighbors, and the calm rhythm of everyday life made her feel safe, happy, and settled. She and her husband Daniel had lived in their little two-story house for 3 years, and the routines of their life, morning coffee on the porch, walks in the evening, dinner together at the table, were comforting. Everything had felt predictable, pleasant, and ordinary. Until the new neighbor moved in. Jason Miller's house had been empty for months. And then, one bright afternoon, moving vans appeared. Emily had watched the activity from her window, curious but polite. When Jason emerged for the first time, he was polite, quietly friendly, and seemed to carry a calm energy about him. He nodded to Emily and Daniel as they carried boxes inside, but he didn't linger for small talk. Something about him was different. Not cold, not unfriendly, but distant, almost fragile. Emily felt a strange pull toward the man she barely knew, a curiosity she couldn't explain. It started subtly. A few nights after Jason moved in, Emily noticed a light flicking on in the upper floor of his house. At first, she thought it was just a coincidence. But then she realized that a single window, that upstairs one facing their backyard, was left open nearly every night. The curtain was drawn aside, letting the warm yellow light spill out like an invitation. Daniel noticed it too, though he didn't say anything at first. Emily tried to ignore it, telling herself she was imagining things. But each evening the open window became harder to overlook. What she saw inside was never inappropriate. Jason would be pacing slowly, reading a book, writing something down, or sometimes strumming a guitar. Occasionally he would just stand by the window, staring at the night sky as if he were searching for something he had lost. Emily didn't know whether he wanted her to see him or whether it was accidental. But there was something intimate and human about it. There was a loneliness there that spoke to her quietly. She couldn't turn away. One evening, Daniel finally asked, "Do you think he leaves the window open on purpose?" His voice was low, tinged with curiosity and a little unease. Emily shook her head. "I don't know. Maybe it's just for air." But deep down, she felt the pull was something more than that. It was like the window was a small crack into someone else's world. A world that suddenly felt alive in a way their own life hadn't for a while. Emily loved Daniel deeply, but lately the evenings felt repetitive, predictable, and safe. Jason's light down, whatever quiet life existed behind it, felt like a story unfolding. It's right in front of them. Over the next few nights, Emily found herself looking forward to the glow from Jason's window. It was comforting, almost magnetic. Sometimes she would sip her tea on the porch, watching the gentle movements upstairs, imagining what he might be feeling, wondering about the stories hidden behind his quiet eyes. There was no shame or impropriety in her thoughts, just a human connection she didn't expect to crave. Daniel, meanwhile, seemed to sense it too. He wasn't jealous. He was thoughtful. He would glance at the window and then back at Emily, as if silently asking whether she was thinking the same thing he was. Their shared curiosity became a small, unspoken tension between them. It wasn't dangerous or romantic, it was simply awareness. The quiet acknowledgement that something unusual was happening next door then. One evening, Emily saw Jason pause by the window longer than usual. His silhouette was still, hands clasped behind him, head tilted slightly as if he were lost in thought. He wasn't performing for anyone. He wasn't aware, or maybe he didn't care, that he was being noticed. The moment felt private yet exposed, vulnerable yet beautiful. Emily felt a pang of empathy, a deep, unexplainable desire to reach out and offer reassurance. Even though she didn't know the man at all, she tried to talk to Daniel about it, but words failed her. How could she explain the strange pull of someone else's life, so small and simple, yet so captivating? Daniel suggested they ignore it, but Emily couldn't. It was more than curiosity. It was a feeling she hadn't felt in a long time, a mixture of intrigue, concern, and quiet admiration for someone brave enough to leave themselves visible, even in the smallest way. By the end of that first week, the open window became a fixture in their evenings. Emily and Daniel would sit on the porch side by side, sometimes speaking, sometimes silent. but always aware of the glowing rectangle across the way. Emily began to feel that life was no longer entirely contained within their own walls. There was something outside, someone outside, who made her world feel a little bigger. Emily didn't understand yet that Jason's window was more than a window. It was a bridge-on invitation without words. Small connection between three lives that had been living parallel but separate. The subtle tension, the quiet fascination, the unspoken emotions that stirred every evening. These were the beginnings of something that neither Emily nor Daniel could have anticipated. And even though the house next door looked ordinary during the day, at night it became a stage for vulnerability and human longing. Emily knew, somewhere deep down, that this simple act, leaving a window open, was about more than air or light. It was about being seen, being noticed, and maybe, just maybe, finding a way back into the world from which Jason seemed so carefully detached. That night, as Emily sipped her tea, she whispered to Daniel, almost to herself, "I think he wants someone to see him." Daniel looked at her, unsure how to respond, and for a moment, both of them stared at the warm light spilling across the lawn. Neither knew exactly what would happen next, but both felt a shift in the rhythm of their ordinary life, a quiet awareness that the world next door was no longer separate from theirs. And for Emily, that window, small, simple, and unassuming, had become impossible to ignore. Emily couldn't stop thinking about Jason. The glow from his open window had become a nightly pull she couldn't resist. Even Daniel noticed her lingering glances, though he never said much, choosing instead to watch silently beside her on the porch. Emily knew she shouldn't be so captivated by someone she barely knew. Yet there was a quiet honesty in Jason that made her heart ache in a way she hadn't felt in years. It wasn't just curiosity anymore. Jason had a presence, a kind of quiet strength wrapped in vulnerability. Emily began to notice small details, the way he moved across the room when she could see him, the tilt of his head when he read, the slow, careful strum of his guitar that seemed more like therapy than performance. One evening, she saw him pause by the window longer than usual, looking at something outside she couldn't see. For a fleeting moment, it felt like he had noticed her, that he might even understand her. She quickly looked away, embarrassed by her own thought. The next day, Emily tried to focus on her own life. She ran errands, cleaned the house, and cooked dinner for Daniel, but Jason's window kept creeping into her mind. Daniel noticed her distraction. He asked if she was tired, if she wanted to rest. She shook her head and smiled, saying she was fine, but he saw the truth anyway. There was a pull, a silent tension between curiosity and concern, and he understood it more than she expected. One evening, while Daniel was at work, Emily stepped outside to water the plants. That's when she noticed a small envelope tucked under the edge of their porch mat. She picked it up, turning it over in her hands. There was no name, no handwriting. She recognized just a plain envelope folded carefully. Inside was a note. "Sorry if the light bothers you. I just don't like the dark." Emily's heart tightened. The words were simple, but they carried weight. Jason wasn't seeking attention. He wasn't showing off. He was quietly confessing a piece of his loneliness, and somehow that confession touched her deeply. She felt an urge to respond, to say something kind, but she didn't know how. She didn't even know if she should. The thought of being the person who acknowledged his vulnerability felt heavy and important all at once. When Daniel returned home, Emily held the note out to him. His brow furrowed as he read it. "He's lonely," Daniel said quietly. There was no judgment in his voice, only understanding. "Maybe we should do something. Invite him over. Talk to him. People don't leave notes like this unless they're reaching out in some way." Emily nodded, a mixture of relief and nervousness swelling in her chest. The idea of meeting Jason beyond the window, truly meeting him, felt both exciting and intimidating. That evening, canny, Emily couldn't sleep. She kept replaying moments of seeing him through the window, the way he tilted his head while reading, the quiet sigh he sometimes let out, the sense that he was carrying some invisible weight. She wondered what kind of life he led, what stories his silence contained. She felt a connection she couldn't explain, a mix of empathy, curiosity, and longing. The night of the dinner arrived, and Emily prepared with care. She wanted everything to feel welcoming, not awkward, not formal. Daniel helped set the table, placing candles and soft lighting that mirrored the gentle glow from Jason's window. When the doorbell rang, Emily felt her heart race. Jason stood there, a little hesitant, holding a small tray of homemade brownies. His shy smile reminded her of the first day she had seen him move in polite, careful, cautious dot inside. The three of them sat around the table. Conversation flowed slowly at first, polite and light, but gradually became more natural. Emily laughed at small jokes. Daniel shared stories from work, and Jason, though quiet at first, began to open up. He spoke about books he liked, music that inspired him, and little things in life that brought him comfort. It was clear he wasn't used to being seen this way. There was no pretense, no effort to impress, just honesty, a rare and delicate honesty that made Emily feel closer to him than she expected. During dessert, Daniel gently asked about the note. Jason's face tightened, and he looked down at his hands. "I leave the window open because I don't like being alone," he admitted softly. "Seeing your porch light, hearing laughter, even if it's faint, it makes me feel connected. Makes me feel like I still belong somewhere." Emily felt a lump in her throat. The vulnerability in his voice, the courage it took to speak these words aloud, was overwhelming. She realized that this man wasn't trying to charm anyone or draw attention. He was simply reaching for connection, in the only way he knew how. Daniel reached across the table, resting a hand on Jason's shoulder in a simple gesture of support. "You're not alone," he said. "You're part of the neighborhood, part of the world around you. You're welcome here anytime." Jason's eyes glistened, a mix of relief and gratitude passing over his face. Emily felt her own chest tighten. There was no romance, no inappropriate tension. It's just a human connection that was rare and precious. For Emily, the dinner marked a turning point. The window that had once been a source of quiet fascination was now a symbol of trust and recognition. Jason's presence was no longer distant, no longer just a figure in a lit-up room. He was a neighbor, a human being with fears, hopes, and the simple desire to be seen. Emily realized that her evenings would never feel the same again. The quiet light across the yard now meant something profound, someone else's life intersecting with hers, someone else's story blending with her own. As the night ended and Jason left, Emily and Daniel stepped onto the porch. The warm glow from his open window spilled across the yard. It no longer felt like a tease or a mystery. It felt like an invitation, a silent promise of connection and understanding. Emily knew their lives were quietly shifting. Something new had begun, delicate, fragile, and deeply human. And for the first time in weeks, Emily felt that the ordinary rhythm of her life had gained a new heartbeat, one that pulsed gently from across the yard through a simple, open window. The night of Jason's visit stayed in Emily's mind all day. She moved around the house with quiet anticipation, her thoughts caught between excitement and nervousness. Daniel, aware of her mood, helped with small preparations, setting the table with care, lighting candles, and making sure the house felt warm and inviting. He didn't comment on her lingering glances toward the window across the yard, but she knew he understood. There was something different about this evening, something delicate and important. And neither of them could put a name to it yet. When the doorbell rang, Emily's heart skipped. Jason stood there holding a small plate of brownies, his shy smile revealing just enough of his nerves. He had never been a man of grand gestures. But Emily could tell he had thought about this visit, that he had considered every small detail. His quiet presence brought with it an air of honesty that was rare, almost fragile, and Emily felt a strange comfort in it. She welcomed him in, and Daniel followed behind, giving him a nod that said more than words ever could. They sat down in the living room first, plates in hand, and conversation began slowly. At first it was light books, music, favorite foods. Jason spoke softly, often pausing to think, and Emily noticed how carefully he chose his words. There was nothing forced in his voice, no attempt to impress, only a careful, measured openness. Daniel shared a few stories from work, stories that made Emily laugh. And she noticed how Jason's eyes softened at the humor, a small warmth appearing in his quiet demeanor. Emily realized that for all his distance, Jason had been yearning for this human connection, for someone to hear him, see him, and accept him without judgment. After a while, dessert arrived, and the conversation turned toward the note Jason had left on their porch. Emily felt her chest tighten as she waited for his reaction. Jason's face went still, almost hesitant, and he looked down at the brownies in his hands. "I leave the window open," he said quietly, "because I don't like the dark. It's not just the physical darkness. I mean, the quiet, the loneliness. Seeing the lights from your house, even faintly, makes me feel seen, connected, like I'm not completely alone in the world." His voice was soft, almost breaking at the edges, but it carried a depth of honesty that made Emily ache in a way she hadn't expected. Daniel reached across the table, placing a hand gently on Jason's shoulder. It was a simple gesture, but it carried reassurance, acceptance, and understanding. "You're not alone," Daniel said quietly. "You have neighbors. You have people who care. You're welcome here anytime." Jason's eyes glistened, and he lowered his head, a subtle sigh escaping him, as if a burden had been lifted. Emily felt a wave of emotion herself, a mixture of relief, empathy, and the strange thrill of witnessing someone finally allow themselves to be truly seen. Emily realized something important in that moment. This was not about attraction or desire. It was about connection. It was about human vulnerability, honesty, and the courage to show oneself to the world. Jason wasn't trying to impress her or Daniel. He was simply seeking acknowledgement, a recognition of his quiet existence. And in giving him that recognition, Emily felt something shift within herself too. She had been drawn to the window, to the light, but now she understood it was more than a flicker across the yard. It was a call for understanding, for empathy. And she had answered it simply by being present. The evening continued with soft conversation, laughter that felt easy and genuine, and the quiet satisfaction of shared understanding. Emily noticed small gestures, how Jason would lean slightly forward when he spoke, how Daniel listened with attentive patience, how the three of them, despite their differences, seemed to find a rhythm together. There was no tension, no jealousy, no awkwardness, only connection, only the simple beauty of human presence and recognition. As the night drew on, Jason prepared to leave. He stood at the doorway, a quiet smile tugging at his lips. "Thank you," he said softly. I didn't expect tonight to feel like this. I didn't expect to feel part of something." Emily nodded, unable to speak at first, feeling her own emotions welling up. Daniel placed a hand on Jason's shoulder once more, offering reassurance without words. "We're glad you came," he said. "You're always welcome." After the door closed behind him, Emily and Daniel stepped onto their porch, feeling the cool evening air brush against their faces. Across the yard, Jason's windows still glowed, the soft yellow light spilling into the darkness like a small beacon. Emily realized she no longer saw it as a curiosity or a temptation. She saw it as a symbol of human connection, a reminder that everyone carried hidden stories, quiet struggles, and unspoken hopes. That night, Emily and Daniel sat together in silence, each lost in thought. Emily reflected on the courage it had taken Jason to leave the window open, to write the note, to visit them. She thought about her own responses, the empathy, the care, the human understanding that had awakened inside her. And she understood something profound. Connection was not always about grand gestures or dramatic revelations. Sometimes it was about small, quiet acts of trust and honesty, acts that could shift lives in ways people never expected. In the following days, the window remained open, but now it carried a different meaning. It was no longer a source of mystery or fascination. It was a reminder that empathy, care, and understanding could create bonds between people. Bonds that did not intrude or harm, but simply offered recognition and companionship. Emily found herself looking at the window differently, seeing Jason not as a distant figure but as a neighbor a human being, a quiet presence that mattered. Emily realized that her life, her marriage, and even her own sense of self had been subtly enriched by these small interactions. The evening with Jason had not threatened her marriage or her values. It had expanded her understanding of kindness, connection, and vulnerability. She felt gratitude, a quiet joy, and a sense of hope she hadn't felt in a long time. The open window had become more than light spilling into the yard. It had become a symbol of what it meant to truly see another person and to be seen in return. As Emily and Daniel prepared for bed that night, they glanced once more at Jason's glowing window. It stood there, gentle and steadfast, a quiet promise of understanding, human warmth, and shared presence. Emily smiled, feeling a sense of peace. Their lives had intersected in a small but meaningful way, and she knew the connection would linger not as a distraction, but as a reminder that empathy and human kindness could transform ordinary lives into something quietly extraordinary. And with that thought, Emily turned off the porch light, Daniel by her side, both of them aware that life next door had grown richer, deeper, and more human, all because of a single open window.